Okay, good morning, Dana Colon. So happy to have you here. Super excited for you to bring your experience with fasting and ketosis. And in particular, I know we're going to talk about partial fasting with this group. So thank you.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. It's exciting what all you're doing and being part of it.
Perfect. Thanks. I know it's super early, so I really appreciate you hopping on. Got to fit it in, right?
Yep.
Cool. All right, well, let's get started right away. And why don't we just get right into, how you started this lifestyle and what brought you to it and what kind of goals you had and what you were looking for.
Okay. Well, I'm a patient of Jason's, and we were working on some peri-menopausal symptoms that I was having, night sweats and weight gain and inflammatory issues. And so he said, "Oh, this would be fun. You want to try it?" And I was pretty skeptical in terms of trying it just because I've always had to eat every couple of hours, like you've said before, and so many other people in the group have said before, paying the hangry consequences otherwise. But I thought, why not give it a shot? So we had started out actually trying to go keto. So that would be reducing the carbs and increasing the fat, but not really changing much else. I was already eating very clean, but we did things like my morning shake. We brought that down in terms of the carb intake and increased the fats a little bit. That then turned into intermittent fasting for me, which was being able to get rid of that morning shake. And I was okay. So it just evolved from there, and then all the diet variation and the through the programs, and as you were learning and sharing that with the group, I was able to then use a variety of tools to fast in different ways more often.
Perfect. Great. Okay, so just going back, as you said, you've been a patient of Jason's for a number of years, and I know you know this, something that Jason and I are really passionate about is if there's something that we want to bring to our patients and our community, that we do it as well, or we do it first. And so I think you were one of the people that Jason had in mind when he was like, we've got to start to really understand on a deep, deep level this ketosis, what is it? This fasting, what is it? And what we found is that these are really effective therapeutic strategies. So ketosis is not something that we stay in all the time. Fasting is not something that we do every day. We have adopted this lifestyle of diet variation and these feast famine cycling. And Dana is someone who's really mastered this over a number of years. And what I love about you, Dana, is you're really great at figuring something out, how to work it in your life and how to make it easy. And so I know that's what we're going to talk about today too, in regards to partial fasting. But let's go back a little bit, and now we could talk about, how you've incorporated this into your life for the long haul.
Um, so through the programs, I've learned how to change it up, and then directly apply it to myself. So what works for me in a particular way this month or this week even may not work for me again. So I've learned how to change it up as I need to. I pretty much do a 5-1-1 the majority of the time, but even the intermittent fasting on the 5 days, I change up as to how I'm actually eating. So the partial fasting came into play there, and that was really interesting for me because I don't like to really fast during my work week, a full water fast. So this gave me the opportunity to be able to reap some of the same benefits, but be able to eat.
Okay, good. So 5-1-1, meaning 5 days intermittent fasting. And then usually in general, the 1 and the 1 is 1 day, 24-hour fast or 1 meal a day, and 1 day a feast where you really open up your eating window and you pretty much eat when you want, what you want, ideally clean sources. And there's a lot of benefits of that. And that's really like a maintenance schedule that a lot of people use to regularly incorporate fasting into their life. How have you incorporated partial fasting into that?
Well, the benefits that I get, I find that when I do the partial fasting, I actually the weight that I lose during that period stays off. I find when I do a longer block fast, and I don't know if you've spoken about that at this point yet, but I've done, 72 hour, let's say. So I might lose 6 pounds over the 72 hours, but within the next 2 days, at least half or more comes back on for me. I reap other benefits from it. So if weight loss isn't the primary goal, then that's okay. But I do find that I have more consistent weight loss if I'm doing the partial fasting. I also like incorporating a few days of meatless meals, which it just kind of is a more focused few days for me, as opposed to just saying, okay, we're not going to have any animal protein. That's one of the elements of the partial fasting protocol. So it kind of allows me to change things up a little bit out of my normal go-to meals. I cycle, week after week. You've mentioned your Taco Tuesday. We have the same thing. It's easy for me to make my shopping list, prepare the food, eat the food. We don't really think about it, but it allows me to change it up in a positive way.
Okay. And so when you're talking about this block fasting, that's usually any fast over 48 hours that, of course, Dana has worked up to over time. So that's not something that everybody can do. But a lot of people actually get to a place where they used to need to eat every couple hours. And as you train your fasting muscle slowly, this just becomes a natural progression. And so I think, Dana, you usually incorporate a block fast seasonally, or do you do it more often than that?
Well, actually, last year we were doing it once a month.
Okay.
We were able to do it Friday. We would eat lunch Friday and not eat again until lunch on Monday. I say we, my husband and I, and it's great to have a buddy, and especially somebody in the house, so I'm not needing to prepare two different sets of meals. We're in it together, and that support is fantastic. So we would eat lunch on Friday and then fast through till lunch on Monday. And we were doing that once a month for probably about 4 or 5 months, and we really enjoyed it. Now we do it less often. We probably do it maybe once a quarter. So I guess seasonally. And I think that's probably more because we've learned other variations that we're able to implement in between.
Perfect. That's what's so nice, I think, about, having all these different types of fasts. And that's part of why I am archiving all these videos on our YouTube channel so that people can hear this information. And maybe if it's not the time now, they can access it later and you can throw this into your types of fast. And I know, with you doing our private program, you were one of the first rounds of our 7-week
Right.
And now that you're in that community, every time you rerun the series, I know you're taking it to another level. So I think that's somewhere along the line where you've started to put in these other fasts.
Right.
So now where are you putting these partial fasts in? So you're no longer doing the once a month block fasting. Is that when you're doing the partial fasting instead?
Yeah. And I'm able to do it. I don't have to do it over the weekend because it's something that I can easily do during the work week. Where the other, I felt like I really had to focus on that weekend hump for us, because I just didn't feel like I could do 3 days of fasting or even 2 days. Even sometimes when if I do a 1 meal a day, I'll typically do lunch. So I'll do a lunch to lunch. It's much easier for me to come home, not eat dinner, just get busy around the house, pack up stuff for the next day, do a couple of errands or whatever. But while I'm at work, which is different from many other people, I've heard you talk about it, I've heard Andrea talk about it. My busiest day at work, it's easy, for you guys to not eat. For me, it's easier and I feel better if I am eating.
Which is great because we're all so different. So that's what's neat too about having different people sharing their stories. So partial fasting, again, is no animal sources. of food, keeping protein low, under 20 grams, keeping good sources of clean, healthy fats up, and being around under 1,000 calories, depending on your weight. And then for most people, compressing the eating window is still important. So doing something like an intermittent fast where your eating window is probably about 6 to 8 hours. So
Exactly.
Dana, for you at the beginning of incorporating partial fasting, what was maybe difficult or tricky to figure out?
The calculations.
Yeah,
It
there's a
just
lot
seemed
of details.
so overwhelming. And it was just like, oh, it's either easier not to eat or to just eat the things that are, you know, what I normally eat.
Your regular
But
go-tos.
exactly. But what I was able to do was find a few recipes that fit the bill and then plug them into Carb Manager, which is what I use for my tracking. And then kind of play with those a little bit. And once I did it a few times, I was able to say, okay, this one's an okay one for me to do in a combo. So I could have XYZ for lunch, come home and have this lighter dinner, still fit within the calories, which we're not used to counting. But again, it changed things up a little bit. And not having the animal protein, how to get creative with where you're going to get the protein and staying under the 20 grams.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
still keep the fats high.
What's that?
And still keep the fats high.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of thinking around it. And especially, when kind of gotten used to the other information around fasting, I have felt like partial fasting is just even a little bit more tricky because there's so many different windows that you have to fit within as far as like fat and calories and protein and going vegetarian or even vegan. But like you said, once you find somewhat of your go-tos, it becomes easier and the preparation is key.
Right.
What something that a lot of people like about the partial fasting is this is actually where you can put in your, I like to call it the 3 F's. So you can have your fat, your fruit, and your fiber. So typically for people that are living, I'll call it a keto adapted or fat adapted lifestyle, again, because we're not in ketosis all the time, but we're using fat as our main fuel source and typically going lower carb. This is a time where it'll feel like you're going higher carb because of the fruits, the avocado, maybe your sweet potatoes. So what are some of the regular foods that you throw in with your partial fasting recipes?
Definitely sweet potato is such a treat. The fruit, so I'll put blueberries into a salad, or I'll put blueberries or other berries into almond milk yogurt, something like that. And it feels like a treat without having a feast day, because even feast days are hard to put together in terms of saying, do I go hog wild? Is it an event that I'm going to? So I'm not in charge of the food that's being served. So, we're just going to eat what's there versus putting together a really planned feast day. So this allows me to, throw in a couple of things over the 3 or 4 days that I'm doing it. And it feels, there's another salad that I use that I chop up an apple. And that just feels like, it really is a treat and it tastes good and it's enjoyable, but I'm not feeling like, oh boy, I'm going to pay the consequences for eating this.
Right, right.
And I'm not counting it in terms of the carbs, because during the partial fasting, we're not actually counting the carbs.
Perfect. Yeah, so that's where we have a little bit more leeway there. And now talk to me a little bit about how you were feeling before you incorporated fasting. So I know you said you had some inflammation, you were peri-menopausal, and that's why Jason wanted you to kind of experiment with this and see how you did. And how are you feeling now in regards to those things, or what were some of the more specific things that you were feeling on a daily basis that have changed?
Well, the inflammation was affecting me mostly in my hands. So my fingers were stiff. I had trigger finger. So my workouts were very tough. Even food preparation was tough because holding the knife and trying to chop, things like that. So that is a huge difference. We worked on that with other treatments in the office, but I think that the food had a huge amount to do with that. And sometimes if I stray and I eat certain things, I will find that some of that will come back. Some comes back immediately, some over time. Um, I never really had hot flashes, but I definitely had night sweats, and that has really subsided and changed. And I can tell sometimes that'll come back. And if I think about, what have I been eating the last couple of days, I can pretty much pinpoint where that's coming from. So a quick elimination helps that. I have way less anxiety. Um, I don't have way less stress in my life, but I definitely have way less anxiety about some of those stresses. So I'm learning how to manage that a little bit better. But I definitely think that the consumption of certain types of food or not has definitely helped that. I sleep much better. I have a ton of energy.
Beautiful. Huge changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think for a lot of people that are just starting to think about getting into fasting, and partial fasting is a good first step for some people. It wasn't the first step that you or I took, but I think for some people who become overwhelmed with just not eating or doing something like a water fast or broth fast, which of course we wouldn't jump right into, we would do intermittent fasting first. But partial fasting is attractive to a lot of people that maybe can't completely limit their caloric intake. And as we're talking about these foods, um, like blueberries and sweet potatoes and things like that that we throw in that we aren't typically eating, that can also sound restrictive to some people. But what we're using is this is essentially what's called like an ancient healing strategy. And so we're going back to eating the way that we're genetically still designed to eat, where we go these cycles of time with food and then time without food. And there's certain foods that nourish us that were meant to be like our sources of sweet and higher carbs. What we're doing is we're using those foods very specifically at very specific times so that we're not running off glucose and that we're not having these insulin surges, which are proven to feed into inflammation, toxicity, cancer, and play a huge role in how we feel. And so I think one of the really important things to address when we talk about fasting is a lot of people before jumping in are maybe fearful that they're going to feel deprived. So I have to ask you, Dana, do you feel deprived?
Never,
And
never.
why is that? Why do you think
Um,
that is?
I don't even think at the beginning of this that I did. I mean, like I said, I had already been eating clean, so that was a big element of it. And I feel like once you get some momentum, um, I eat a huge variety of foods that are delicious. Everything that I prepare is flavorful, and it all does taste good. So I never feel, and even when I'm fasting, that serves a purpose for me, like even just the water fasting. So I've gotten to that point where I'm okay with that. But I also feel like I throw something in here and there where if it's something that I miss or something that I enjoy, or if it's an occasion, um, that I can that I can have it if I want it. But I also know that I don't feel good sometimes, and that's part of the lesson learned. So I feel like I would encourage people to try it. And then, how did you actually feel after you binged on something, or how did you feel after you ate something that used to be something that you've got enjoyment from, but maybe you don't feel that good anymore? And so you then learn to eliminate that, and you realize that the bad feeling is way worse than the good that you thought it was going to bring.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. And I've learned to look at food now as like short-term pleasure versus long-term um, pain. So and not that I don't fit in certain foods, I mean, that's the beauty of a feast day. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. Actually, I want to help people really understand not only that you can have a feast day, but that you have to have a feast day once a week. And so that's where you can throw in, again, ideally clean sources of higher carb and sweeter foods. But that's also your place where if you want to release that valve and go crazy, that's the day that you do it. And that's a really important piece to this whole lifestyle. It's almost like working out. Like for a lot of people who work out really hard, one of the most important workouts that they have is their rest day, because that's when you recover and that's when your body reaps all the benefits of what you're doing. And so that becomes really important. But like you said, I've also learned to think about how does food make me feel. And I feel deprived when I don't feel good. Like I am someone who loves to have energy. I want to take advantage of every minute of every day, and I want to feel my best. And I look at food that fuels that or that doesn't. And so I feel deprived when I'm eating food that takes that away from me. And it sounds like you feel that way too. So
Yeah. And actually, that just brought up a thought. I am a lifetime Weight Watcher member. I mean, I think I started when I was at 11. I was about 11, and I probably was on and off a Weight Watcher until 2008, maybe. Um, but I remember being in a meeting once and somebody saying that they looked at food now just to fuel their body, like not as pleasure, not as enjoyment, just to fuel their body. And I thought, that sounds very sad. Like cooking, I love to cook. I've always cooked. And so that's so much a part of me. So cooking goes with eating. And, like so many people, it's so much a part of their family function. You get together, you eat. And so I thought that was a very sad comment when she said that. Like she was just going to eat to fuel her body. And now I look at that so differently. I don't think that that's sad at all. I think that that is such an amazing thing to do for yourself, is to fuel your body properly. Yes, enjoy what you eat. We shouldn't just, because otherwise we would just be popping pills that could fuel us. Enjoy what you're eating, but have an understanding about how that makes you function better, how that makes you feel better. And so I definitely look at that in such a different light now.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, our food is our fuel and it can be super enjoyable too. So I know you're passionate about cooking, and I love that you're going to be bringing more of that into our private group at least. And we're figuring that out, but maybe sharing some recipes and some cooking channel or something like that. Yeah. And it's really important to know that the food does taste good, and we should have that enjoyment around food and that pleasure, and that food is our fuel and that's what it's intended for. So great point. Dana, thank you for sharing your experience with fasting. And I think this is a perfect time to wrap up. And is there anything else that you want to maybe share with anyone watching that's considering fasting or thinking about it and maybe fearful or has negative thoughts around it?
Well, two things. In general, fasting, it's definitely a build up. So you need to be able to be eating the right things in order to get to a point to fast properly and still feel good. Specifically to the partial fasting, because of all what I figured the calculations on the prep, if you're starting on Monday, don't start prepping on Saturday or Sunday. Honestly, try to give it a week or two of trying to put together what seems like a couple of meals. Like I use these cheat sheets. I know I wrote things out, I added things up, so that you're not feeling overwhelmed saying, oh my God, what am I going to eat tomorrow, knowing that you have to do that prep. I would say give it a little bit of time so that you can kind of put that menu together for yourself. That definitely has helped me over the last few times that I've done it, having a plan in advance.
Perfect. Yeah, that preparation really takes the daily thought out of it. So that's definitely important. Okay. Anything else, Dana?
I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing your amazing experience to us, and look forward to doing more with you. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of how far you've come, and you're so inspiring to all of us. So thank you.
And I'm so grateful for all that you share with all of us.
Aw, thanks.